All right, we are going in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hody live. Hope you're having a fantastic Saturday morning. 8 o'clock here, Eastern Standard Time, depending on where you're watching live. See, we got 3 viewers already on here. Welcome aboard. Thank you for tuning in to Raw Takes today. We're going to be going all the way until 9 o'clock. So I just want to open the floor right away. I have my Twitter and X account on my phone open, ready to go for live reaction. Please also make sure to state some opinion or whatever you have thoughts on in the top chat as well. And I'm going to get to those reactions as the podcast goes on. So thankful you're joining us this morning. If you like the show, check us out on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Hody Raw Takes, Instagram at Hody Raw Takes, and of course on X, my username specifically is Hody Raw Takes. It's great to be with you guys this morning, and this is the first edition of the show, so we're going to try some new things out. Going to go over some sports topics. If you have any opinion, please make sure to state it in the live chat, and I'm going to give you a shout out live right here on the podcast. But of course, if you miss anything, the live will be up right after it's done as well, and you can always go back and skim around and try to find some things you may want to hear about. We're going to start things off right away, though, with Major League Baseball, and I'll tell you what, when it comes to, in particular, my team, the Cleveland Guardians, things are really starting to heat up, and I think we're starting to really learn who is who in Major League Baseball. The Guardians right now, they're 40-46. They've lost, I believe, 9 games now in a row. And they had an okay start to the year. They didn't look like they were a world-ending team. But lately they've been a mess, a shell of themselves. And even when there was high moments, like a few weeks ago against the Cardinals, they were playing the Cardinals, and I believe it was the second game of the series. Lane Thomas, David Fry, and Carlos Santana hit home runs, but it wasn't enough. The Cubs no, it was the Cubs. I'm sorry. I'm confusing a Cardinals game with the Cubs game. Well, there was a Cardinals game in particular I'll get to in a second. But with the Cubs, we were playing the Cubs, and we had 3 home runs from our guys, and the Cubs didn't even have any home runs. And you know what happened? What happened was that the Cubs scored on RBI singles and doubles and won that game 5-4. And Tanner Bybee was a shell of himself. And I know I have his bobblehead right here. But honestly, that game stands a little bit of why the Guardians have really just been a bad baseball team over the last couple of weeks. And even one game against the Cardinals in particular, we had a 6-run inning. We were breaking a scoreless inning streak of about 22 innings at the time, and we finally broke through and had a 6-run inning. And then we blew that game and lost from 6-1 to 9-6. And the Cardinals ended up taking the series. And the Cardinals, I believe, are an okay baseball team. I don't think they're world-ending. I do think the Cubs are really good. And I think another indictment of that is that Matthew Boyd is now playing for Chicago. When you look at Matthew Boyd playing for the Chicago Cubs now, as opposed to the Cleveland Guardians, that honestly falls on ownership. Or typically you might say the GM. But honestly, Antonetti's been so strapped to the cash the Guardians give him. I don't know if I want to blame Antonetti because he's done so much good out of having as much cash as he's had. It's honestly a darn shame. So to me, I blame ownership for this season as of right now. And now there's calls for Stephen Vogt to be fired. And I don't think Stephen Vogt deserves the can right now. I mean, it's his second season. He's coming off a Manager of the Year award last year when he took the Guardians all the way to the ALCS. So I don't think Stephen Vogt is at fault here at all. I think this year we're just learning a little bit more about who the Guardians are. And I think personally that that's a big problem for ownership. This should all fall on ownership. The Dolans have cost cut numerous times. We were a World Series contender last year. And what did the Dolans do? Instead of adding additions to the team, they made subtractions. Josh Naylor is now an Arizona Diamondback, for example. Andres Jimenez and Miles Straw. I mean, Miles Straw didn't do much to contribute either way. But Andres Jimenez's glove, granted, he hasn't really gotten going offensively for Toronto all the way, but Toronto's certainly gotten going. Andres Jimenez and Miles Straw now with the Toronto Blue Jays. I'll say this, Miles Straw did increase his stats with Toronto. He didn't do that while he was here, so take that for what it's worth. Having said that, though, I mean, when you subtract instead of add to a roster that's contending for a championship, the fault is ownership, especially in Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball doesn't have the salary cap that the luxurious NFL and NBA do. Major League Baseball teams can spend as ever much as they want, which is why the Yankees and Dodgers always could build powerhouse teams. And teams like the Guardians struggle. And it's not fair. And, you know, I could rip into Rob Manfred and how I think he runs the league terribly all day long. And it does start with the commissioner at the end of the day, too, when it comes to things like a salary cap. Like Paul Tagliabue, he decided when he was the commissioner of the NFL to adapt to a changing landscape and make sure that everyone has a salary floor and a salary cap. And that way it forces teams to have to rebuild at some point. Like New England, sure, was a dynasty for 20 years, but now they're going through a long rebuilding process. Now they have Mike Vrabel. Maybe things will get better this year, but still, the New England Patriots, after 20 years of greatness, they've come back down to earth and have been pretty much a bad football team the last couple of years. Major League Baseball is not like that. When have the Colorado Rockies outside of 2007 ever had a good season? Maybe a couple playoff appearances here and there. They've never had a good season. When have the Miami Marlins outside of their World Series years ever had a good season? I know they did win, I believe, 9 games in a row recently, but had they ever had a good season outside of that? No. They've been a nothing franchise. Probably a poverty franchise with that in mind. So, having said that, I think it is important in Major League Baseball to implement that salary floor and cap in the future, and I think the sport won't die off as quickly as it is. I'm worried the sport's already slowly starting to die out, and I think a lot of these rule changes and a lot of what's going on with the marketing in terms of what's going on at the upper level and these cheap owners cost cut time and time again. If you own the Miami Marlins or Colorado Rockies or even the Chicago White Sox, I mean, the White Sox are better this year than they were last year, but they're still not a very good baseball team. How do these owners not get held accountable all the way with fans not showing up to ballparks, with marketing down to the tubes, local media markets mad at them? How come they keep getting rewarded? They keep getting rewarded for terrible baseball or okay baseball. The Guardians, despite having some great years, have overall been an okay franchise. They haven't been a great one. They've been an okay franchise. I know there's a lot of comparisons that, oh, they're the Pittsburgh Steelers of Major League Baseball. Sure, they have a great culture. There's Guardians culture. Guards ball, talk all that. Same thing when we were the Indians. We had it all. The culture was here in Cleveland. But even though we have that sense of culture, the Guardians don't execute in ownership. They don't execute in ownership, and it's a big problem for them. And why I struggle all the way to really get on board every single season saying this team could really, really make a run. Even last year, I was struggling to say they were going to make a run to the ALCS. And what happened anyway? They got axed by the New York Yankees. Now, the New York Yankees, as of right now, have been struggling. I will say that. Not as bad as the Mets have been. The Mets are trying to really build a powerhouse team there, but I don't think the Mets are going to have much to worry about in the long run. They definitely need some pitching, though. The New York Yankees, on the other hand, they're 48-40. They let the Blue Jays kind of take over the AL East right now, which I think everybody in baseball is fine with that. I'd rather Toronto win that division than not. I'm kind of surprised Toronto's been as good as they've been this year. But the Yankees are 48-40. Even the Tampa Bay Rays, they've 48-40. They had a really good stretch of baseball here. I picked the Rays to finish last in the division, so definitely I'm eating my own words there. Red Sox are bubbling 500. I thought the Red Sox were going to be a lot better, but so far they really haven't proved it out to be. They're an okay baseball team, and it's only about just a little over halfway through the season, so there's still a lot of baseball to be played. But when I look at the Boston Red Sox, I think that team should be a lot better than bubbling 500 based on what their lineup is, who they have. I mean, they still made also an insane trade at the deadline. So, having said that, though, so there is a little bit of a loss there for the Red Sox. I wasn't sure if they were kind of throwing in the towel on the season, but at the end of the day, they are still bubbling around 500. When you look at the last place team, though, the Baltimore Orioles, I'm kind of shocked by that, too. I actually picked them to win the division, but they already had a managerial change. They're 38-49. They got a long way to go when you look at the AL East right now. So, to me right now, the Yankees, they need to get back in the driver's seat if they want to win the division at the very least, but they're definitely bubbling some wild card spots here. Toronto's been good. I'll give the Blue Jays credit. They had an awesome series against the Yankees this week, and they ended up sweeping them 3 games in a row and scored a lot of runs doing so. They had an 11 and a 12-run game over the Yankees. The Yankees offensively, they didn't necessarily struggle. I mean, the Yankees scored 9 runs in the game on Wednesday. So, the Yankees offense has still been there. They just haven't been winning ball games. But granted, I think a lot of us would like to see the Yankees outside of New York, of course, lose some ball games. I think that'll be totally fine with us. As I mentioned, I'm all in on the Chicago Cubs. I really like what they're doing. They have great offensive players. They have great pitching. I think Matt Boyd is just sugar on top for what's in their rotation as of right now. And you look at Imanaga, for example, I struggled to say his name. He's been pretty well for the Chicago Cubs this year. You look at some of the guys they have batting in their lineup as well. I think you have a strong center fielder in Crow Armstrong. Kyle Tucker definitely gets the job done when he can. The Cubs are a good roster. I like what the Cubs are doing. I like that. I think they're managed very well. I think they have good intuition. They're a good baseball team. I think they have a good chance of competing in the National League. I don't think they're going to take down the LA Dodgers, but I think they are going to make a good case to try to make the National League Championship Series this year. I think the Chicago Cubs have that good of a lineup, and when you add guys like a Matthew Boyd as like a sugar on top kind of piece, like the Guardians actually should have, that's going to help the Chicago Cubs out a ton. When you look at the rest of the National League Central, though, I mean, the Milwaukee Brewers, they've had some good moments. I mean, I'm not going to argue that. Jackson Chourio, obviously a rising star when you look at the Chicago Cubs, the Milwaukee Brewers lineup. But also thinking about pitching to a degree, when you look at the big name, Jacob Misarowski is taking off. I mean, he's just been phenomenal for Milwaukee. And having said that, too, they're 10 games above 500. They're definitely bubbling on a wild card spot. They won the division last year. They're a very well managed baseball team. They did have kind of an early playoff exit because their bullpen last year, I think, was a lot better than it is this year. But still, the Milwaukee Brewers, to me, they've definitely shown a lot of promise, I think, in terms of their future and in terms of this season. And I think they're going to be making some noise with teams like the Chicago Cubs going forward. The Cardinals bubbling around 500, about 5 games above. The Cardinals have been somewhat more impressive than they've been the last couple of years. They have a good baseball culture, too. The Reds definitely, I think, Tito Francona's figuring things out little by little over there. And then the Pirates are a mess. I mean, they're 38-51. Pirates have good pitching. They just have very little offense. And outside of like O'Neal Cruz, and if O'Neal Cruz is your best hitter, I don't know what the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to do. But, Paul Skeens still an elite pitcher. Pittsburgh Pirates are weird. And they say they're the Cleveland Browns of baseball. They might actually be right on that one. I mean, the Guardians haven't won a World Series since 1948, though, so I'm not willing to call them the Pittsburgh Steelers of baseball by any stretch. The Diamondbacks are 4th place in the National League West. I should highlight them a little bit. They've lost so many games scoring 9 or more runs. I don't know how they do it. Clearly, they have bullpen issues, but their offense is really, really good. They have great offensive players on the Arizona Diamondbacks. Clearly, they need some more bullpen pitching because their offense could light it up. Their offense could compete for a World Series, in all honesty, if they had better pitching, but they don't. And so that's why they're 4th in the National League West right now. But granted, they have a lot of offense on that team. It's a darn shame that they're 43-45 because there's a lot of games in the L column they should have won and didn't win. Obviously, they're not as bad as the Colorado Rockies are, who are 20-68, but granted, the Diamondbacks at 43-45, that's pretty disappointing. Giants and the Padres kind of expect them to be. I mean, Gavin Sheets a lot of the times for the Padres bat 7th in the lineup. And if Gavin Sheets is batting 7th in your lineup, you have a pretty damn good lineup. And the Dodgers obviously rolling over the top right now. I think it's going to be hard, honestly, for anyone in Major League Baseball to stop the Dodgers and Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman and those guys. This might be a back-to-back World Series championship. Outside of maybe the Mets or the Phillies, I don't even know if I want to go towards the Phillies, but the Mets, really. I don't know if I could trust anybody outside of maybe one of those 2 NL teams to really compete with the Dodgers. The Dodgers are stacked, and they only continue to get more stacked. The Padres could push them if they end up in a playoff series, but I don't think the Padres, when push comes to shove, are going to win a series against the LA Dodgers. To me, this looks like it's possibly the beginning of a Major League Baseball dynasty. And we really haven't seen too many dynasties in Major League Baseball lately. We've seen some very good teams like the Astros win 2 World Series, one, granted, has an asterisk next to it. But granted, it's still there. The Houston Astros, of course, now they're also leading the AL West, and they've really come to life because the Houston Astros are a good organization that know what the hell they're doing. Teams like the Guardians need to kind of follow foot. And I'll actually give the Detroit Tigers a lot of credit right now because the Tigers are kind of watching the rest of the AL Central struggle, and they haven't struggled one bit this year. And they have, I want to say, okay offensive players, pretty good pitching, obviously headlined by Tarek Skubal. The Tigers, to me, have been kind of the culture shift, I should say, taking place in the AL Central. To me, this feels like it could be the Tigers division the next 10 years. It's really kind of been the Guardians, maybe the Twins here and there. But I think the Guardians have the most division titles within the last 10 years. And to me, I feel like there might be slightly a shift towards the Detroit Tigers because they're exceptionally managed by A.J. Hinch, despite, the Asterix 2017 World Series. But he's in Detroit now. It's a different era, yada, yada, yada. Tarek Skubal, obviously, headlining the pitching rotation. The Detroit Tigers have the horses right now in pitching. They have some decent bats. They already have over 50 wins. The Guardians aren't coming close to that right now. The Guardians, honestly, they're on pace to lose probably 70 games this year. And it's a damn shame for an organization that's known for being really good. But honestly, really okay to me. So that's my thoughts on everything going on in baseball right now. Also, should probably mention the Luis Ortiz investigation. I believe it's for alleged gambling. I still saw the reports earlier this morning, but there was more earlier this week, of course. That's still kind of an ongoing investigation. I do need to touch on it just to bring it up. But interesting situation there with the Guardians if he was betting on those pitches. But granted, Luis Ortiz is under investigation by Major League Baseball. Till we know more details, I don't want to go too strong on that subject. But honestly, he's been like the Guardians pitching staff all year. He's been essentially hot or cold. And I don't think necessarily Luis Ortiz has given up on the season, kind of like how I think Tanner Bybee has given up on the season, because Tanner Bybee's been awful this year. I'll just say it flat out. But granted, Luis Ortiz is not a consistent guy. And the Guardians are supposed to get back Shane Bieber at some point, but I don't expect him to be the savior either at this point. If you're the Guardians, I think you're a selling team. I think Kansas City's kind of in that boat too, the Royals, and maybe the Minnesota Twins are by there now. I mean, Guardians were second place at the beginning of this week, but this losing streak has gotten so out of control, it's dropped them all the way to fourth place, and they have a long way to go. Still a lot of baseball to be played. It's only in the middle of July. So we'll see how it all takes place. And there's a lot of baseball left to be played, and we'll just have to see. There's a lot going on. All right, let's move on to the NBA. Obviously, Raw Takes has been on hiatus for about a month and a half, so I really didn't touch on the rest of the NBA playoffs. But Oklahoma City did win the finals. Of course, you probably know that by now. There was some poor turnout at the parade, and I know a lot of people were making jokes on the internet about that. That stadium, that arena, I should say, was packed every single night in the playoffs. Their fans showed up, and maybe it just wasn't the greatest turnout at a parade. Oklahoma City, I still think, is a great NBA city. Good to see a small market win it. And then to top it all off, to put sugar on top of the sundae, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just signed a 4-year, $85 million extension that'll go through all the way till 2030, I believe, 2029, 2030, I believe, around that season. So if you're Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you just got the bag, you just won the finals, you're in a really good place right now, and you're probably the best Thunder player of all time at this point. I'd say over KD because you just won the chip. It's OKC's first chip in the Thunder era as opposed to the Supersonics era. There's also videos going on the internet about Seattle not even making reference to the NBA title. And I kind of get it. I mean, the way it was done wasn't great for Seattle. So Seattle, I still think, deserves an NBA team. Will they ever get one? Still to be a question mark. But granted, the Thunder were a great team. There was poor turnout at the parade, but I don't look too much into that. It's not like Northeast Ohio when the Cavs won the championship in 2016. And so far, that's been our everything. We're in the start of a possible new 10-year drought. Just want to let everyone know. But granted, 9 years ago, when the Cavs did win the championship, the town was crazy. And obviously, with the history that's in Cleveland, Ohio, probably a little bit different than what's in Oklahoma City. They don't really have much else out there. But granted, it is what it is. It is a smaller market. I'm not looking too much into that. I think you got to look into the fact that Oklahoma City was the most balanced team in the NBA this year. When I say balanced team, it's because I don't really think we're in a super team era anymore. And I think a lot of people agree with me on that. It's going to come down to really who's the most balanced team that wins the championship. And Oklahoma City this year has been the most balanced team. Last year it was the Boston Celtics. The year before it was the Denver Nuggets. In 2022 it was the Golden State Warriors. I mean, these weren't really super. Obviously, the Golden State Warriors had a dynasty in the 2000s. I'm talking about the 2022 team specifically. That wasn't a dynasty Golden State team. That was just the most balanced Golden State team in a very balanced league. You don't necessarily need 3 or 4 superstars to win championships anymore. Everybody has one superstar, I think, at this point, and then some really good players. I think if you're the Lakers, you technically have 2 superstars in Luka Doncic and LeBron James, but LeBron James is an aging superstar. Luka Doncic is a superstar now. I'm willing to say LeBron James is definitely at the tail end of his career, and we're looking at him more so as just a really good player at this point. And you can have really good players and be a really balanced team. I think the Houston Rockets, now that they got Kevin Durant, they're a very balanced team in this NBA. I think Şengün is really going to be the superstar for them, though. I think Kevin Durant is on the tail end of his career, too. And we've seen he can cause problems when he goes to other places. Obviously, when he was with the Nets, there was some good moments there, but it wasn't great. And then the chemistry in Phoenix just didn't work. And I think the chemistry in Phoenix worked when Monty Williams was the head coach and Chris Paul was the leader and the voice of that team outside of Devin Booker. Devin Booker is obviously a lot older than he used to be now as well. He's still relatively young, nevertheless. He's definitely a lot younger than Kevin Durant. But, the Phoenix Suns might have a decent future set up now that they're getting Jalen Green and a couple picks sent to their way. But KD had to get out of that environment. That just wasn't for him. And now the Houston Rockets lock a lot of guys down, too. You think of Fred VanVleet still there, Steven Adams, a backup center. Obviously, you have Şengün. We know what he brings to the table. They have a lot of good players in Houston. That's going to be another really balanced team with the Rockets. I think when you look at a team such as the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think they balance pretty well with them now at this point, too. And we've seen that teams that win the championship usually are out by the second round the following year. It's happened, I believe, the last 4 or 5 seasons that way. So I think that it's possible we see that again and the trend continues. Is Oklahoma City on the verge of a dynasty? It's possible. I don't think so. I do not think Oklahoma City is on the verge of a dynasty. I think the NBA is just very balanced at this point, like I mentioned. The Memphis Grizzlies, to me, are a pretty balanced team. They almost won 50 games last year. I like John Morant a lot outside of, his off-the-court issues. I like a lot of the additions they made this offseason so far. Like, they just got Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome's not a postseason performer. I think we learned that with the Cavs this year. But now that they have Ty Jerome coming off the bench most likely, I think that gives Memphis another horse off the bench, and that's going to help them off a little bit, I think, next year too, when you already have a superstar like Ja. But, you look at these teams, Ja's the superstar with Memphis. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think Chet Holmgren's a future superstar, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the superstar with Oklahoma City. You look over in the Eastern Conference, Donovan Mitchell with the Cavs. Who else is really a superstar? Evan Mobley's supposed to be. He's still technically developing into that. We'll see if that comes to fruition. But Donovan Mitchell, you have as your superstar with the Cavs. You look at the Boston Celtics, obviously Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I don't know if I'm willing to go and say Jaylen Brown's a superstar, but Jason Tatum certainly is. Atlanta Hawks have Trae Young and nothing else. I mean, he's a superstar, but I'd say he's probably towards the lower end of superstar. Indiana, Tyrese Halliburton has the potential to be a superstar, but I'm still going to just say he's a really good all-star at this point because he's been clutch. We saw it all playoff long, but he's not been consistent, and that's Tyrese Halliburton's biggest problem. But granted, I think he's the sole reason that series went 7 games, and we probably would have had a ball game if Halliburton didn't get hurt at the end of Game 7 or in the middle of Game 7. And obviously we know what the end result was in Oklahoma City winning a championship. So granted, I think we need to give Tyrese Halliburton some credit there for that. But other than that, I don't think he's a superstar yet. I think he's a really good basketball player who's just not there all the way yet. I think Tyrese Halliburton's got a lot of work to do before he becomes that official superstar player. Indiana, though, a really good season, and we'll talk about them in just a second. The New York Knicks are balanced too. Obviously, you have Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. And now you have Mike Brown walking in the door, not Tom Thibodeau, which I still think is ridiculous firing on both ends. I don't know why the Kings fired Mike Brown, who was essentially their most successful coach in franchise history at this point. And I don't know why Tom Thibodeau was fired after he took a team that wasn't supposed to go to the conference finals So granted, I think it's both those firings were stupid, but I think the Knicks hiring Mike Brown is the right move. But Mike Brown still at the same time, you can't expect to have a longevity with any kind of organization in the NBA because they just fire guys left and right like there's no tomorrow. Granted, I think Mike Brown is the right hire for the Knicks if you're going to fire Tom Thibodeau. Tom Thibodeau, I think, deserves another NBA job, though, just as much as Mike Brown did, because neither one of those guys should have been fired this year from their respective organizations. But that's a discussion for another day. One guy who does deserve to get fired from his job, in my opinion, is Doc Rivers, because I don't think he's very good at it. And the Milwaukee Bucks getting Miles Turner now from Indiana, that's going to be a big thing, too, because Miles Turner was kind of the force with Indiana. I mean, Halliburton kind of was the executor in terms of the clutch plays. Pascal Siakam was kind of that veteran leader presence. And so was Miles Turner, though. He was the second horse in the bullpen there. I think Miles Turner really, really was a good force of Indiana. He was there the longest. He had the most longevity in Indianapolis with the Pacers. And when you look at their playoff run, Miles Turner, I think, was a big vocal and emotional leader for them. And we're at a point now where I don't necessarily know how the Indiana Pacers bring that back because they don't have it anymore. They let it go to Milwaukee. So, and Milwaukee did move off of Damian Lillard. To me, if they just got Miles Turner, it says that A, the NBA is still an incredibly balanced league, and B, Giannis might be staying because I don't see what the Milwaukee Bucks really get out of that move. I think the Bucks with Giannis have a good move if they have a good supporting cast. They did lose Brook Lopez to the LA Clippers, and the Clippers are a retirement home of the NBA. They're not going anywhere outside of a first-round loss next year. I just want to emphasize that right off the rip. But before we even get to that, I mean, the Bucks, to me, if Giannis is staying, I get the Miles Turner move. If not, I don't. And if you're the Bucks, you have Doc Rivers as your head coach. So do you expect you're going to even win a playoff series with that? And they fired Adrian Griffin for a stupid reason. I'll keep saying that's been the downfall of the Milwaukee Bucks ever since they won the championship in 2021, because there was talks of them being a dynasty. There was talks of Denver being a dynasty. Golden State already was a dynasty. I think 2022 was kind of the fading era a little bit, the last title of a fading era. 2024, Boston Celtics, are they supposed to be a dynasty? They looked like a very flawed basketball team against the Knicks in the playoffs. And now Oklahoma City is going to be the talk. Because of all these teams going to be dynasty question marks, I question if there even will be a dynasty in the NBA anytime soon. Parity is definitely the big thing with all these teams, and we haven't had repeat champions since the 2010s when Golden State did it. It's been a new championship every year. So I think that's good for the NBA too. I think it's going to increase ratings a little bit for them in terms of interest. I think things the NBA could do better. Obviously, the stupid play-in tournament is dumb, but it's not as bad as the in-season tournament. The in-season tournament is ridiculously stupid. The Bucks won it this year, and I don't think anyone cares about it. I don't even think people in Milwaukee care about it. I think they want an NBA championship. And so, to me, I think that's kind of where you draw the line. But going back to the NBA balance and why I think it could increase ratings and why the NBA should take advantage of this is because when you don't have a super team, that means almost everybody has a chance. I don't want to say almost everybody. We know who the bad teams are. But everybody that's going to make the playoffs has a chance to win in the playoffs. And I think that is huge for the NBA. And you got to take advantage of this. Now, Oklahoma City could turn out to be a dynasty. I might be wrong. I think the league is too balanced to handle a dynasty like that. But granted, when you look at the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Denver Nuggets, Golden State Warriors of 2022, not the original ones, the Milwaukee Bucks, all those teams that are kind of like one and done and then they lose in the second round the following year, that's really been what the NBA has been about with the parity over the last few years. So to me, I think you got to take advantage of that. And the NBA ratings have suffered overall. Honestly, they might have suffered against the NHL when Edmonton and Florida made the Stanley Cup final because those games were getting talked like mad and the NBA games were kind of not. It was kind of pushed to the side, I should say. And it was two small markets. I'm not going to even make that excuse. I think Oklahoma City and Indiana were both very likable basketball teams. So to me, I think when you have this balance in the league, take advantage of it and go all the way in on this. and ignore things like the stupid in-season tournament, the play-in tournament, all that, you got a really balanced league where I think 12 to 15 teams might have a chance, as opposed to what used to be 7 or 8 teams really had a chance to win. Unless it was like the 90s when it was all Bulls and Houston Rockets, or the 2010s when it was all LeBron and the Golden State Warriors. Like, we're really at a point where balance is the thing in the NBA. I honestly could say next year the Cavs, the Celtics, the Knicks, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Houston Rockets, Minnesota Timberwolves. I didn't even talk about them. The Minnesota Timberwolves, the Los Angeles Lakers, possibly. The Clippers, I don't think so, but maybe. I mean, it's still a balanced league. These teams all have a shot to possibly win the finals next year. Now, I will eliminate teams to a degree like the Clippers because I don't think they have young enough players to win a championship. But I think literally there's about 10 to 15 teams next year that have a shot to win the NBA Finals, as opposed to what was originally just about 5 to 8. So that's good for the NBA, and the NBA needs to take advantage of it. They've done a lot of stupid things over the last couple of years where I think it's hurt ratings to a degree, and I think the in-season tournament being one of those things, it's kind of ruined the reputation of the NBA. Also, the play-in tournament, when you have 20 teams making the postseason, that's a lot of a 30-team league. So that's also not helped the quality of their product. And also the lack of defense. I mean, when you look at the 2007 finals, the Cavs lost, I think it was game 2 or game 3. I think it was game 3, 75 to 72. And now scores are going all the way up to the 140s. That's double both of those scores, 75, 72, and up to the 140s. That's just how the NBA is. There is a very much so focus on the offensive play and not as much the defensive play. And when the good defensive play comes, it's never in the regular season. It's in the postseason. Why do you think the Cavs didn't make it out of the second round this year? The Cavs, when they had to play defense most, did it during the regular season, not during the postseason. And when they went full go, Indiana was way too physical, was just a much better balanced team. And even though the Cavs had that core 4, which we thought was going to disrupt everybody but Boston in the Eastern Conference. We wouldn't have even gotten Boston if we would have won that series. But granted, it wasn't enough to pass Indiana. So that's on the Cavs to figure out, obviously. The Boston Celtics, obviously an underwhelming year based on the result. But granted, they are coming off a championship, and they still have a lot of key pieces there. But Porzingis isn't coming back. They still have their 2 core guys. It's like a core 2 in Boston with a great bench. But really, you're at a point in the NBA where instead of needing that superstar, you need 10 guys that are at least really good players to win a championship. The Houston Rockets, I think, of this past year are a good form of what we could see moving forward. And now that they got Kevin Durant, that might disrupt the league a little bit when it comes to the Houston Rockets and what's going on in the Western Conference. Because the Houston Rockets were right there the entire season. Oklahoma City just happened to be way ahead of them in terms of the standings. But the Western Conference is definitely, I think, the more loaded conference, but it's still very, very balanced. And the Eastern Conference truthfully is too. I think the Cavs, Knicks, Celtics, even if the Bucks bring back Giannis, Indiana, even though Indiana I think might be hurt a little bit by the Miles Turner loss, I think it's possible that all those teams have an equal shot of winning the championship. And we just won't know until how they play in the postseason. But you could take in part little things as well, like the Cavs, they didn't really play great in the postseason last year, so should they play great in the postseason next year? Milwaukee Bucks have been first-round outs the last couple of years. Should you expect them to go to the second round next year? Those questions can be answered now during this offseason and as the regular season begins this fall. So that's going to be something to look at for 2026. But obviously the Oklahoma City Thunder looking to repeat as champions. But will they even make it out of the second round is going to be the biggest question mark of it all. All right, we're going to move on to the WNBA. Little bit about the WNBA. Caitlin Clark has kind of been the force of the WNBA, I think, and that she's already kind of an all-star starter. I think clearly when you base it on fan vote, that's a big thing. And so Caitlin Clark being kind of the market that the WNBA is, I mean, let's just be honest, she is the WNBA. I don't think there's a player in the WNBA you could honestly say is remotely even close to Caitlin Clark in terms of not just, you know, their market and their who they are as a player, but in terms of what they bring to the league. Caitlin Clark in her second season has essentially brought all this stuff to the WNBA, and now they're at a point where they're expanding to Detroit, Philadelphia, Cleveland is getting a team right here locally in town. So to me, I think that's big that Caitlin Clark has been kind of the producer for all that for the WNBA. She's already kind of grown the sport 2 years in because that's just how good she's been. But the WNBA has a massive problem on their hand, and it's not Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark, to me, is the WNBA right now. When I think of the WNBA, I'm going to think of Caitlin Clark. The problem is the league doesn't seem to appreciate that. Caitlin Clark is trying to make women's basketball bigger than it is. And I think she's done a great job about that. I think she's handled everything the right way. I think she said all the right things. I think she's done a terrific job. But everybody else in the WNBA who have been wanting this league to grow and to expand into bigger markets and to become a more powerful player for viewership, for sponsorship, for increased wages. I mean, all that stuff. They've been preaching it forever. They need to appreciate that Caitlin Clark is in the league and has brought all these things. I don't know if the league can expand to Detroit, Philadelphia, or Cleveland without Caitlin Clark. Now, there was comments by her teammate Sophie Cunningham on how the WNBA should play in cities like Nashville, Miami, more glamorous cities, better markets, probably at this point, more tap potential. And I get it. Like Detroit, Philly, and Cleveland are kind of old school. There's no doubt about that. But these are also cities that have worked with the NBA in the past, so we know basketball can thrive there. And granted, even though Nashville and Miami are cool markets to try, and Miami probably a good NBA city as well, seeing that the Heat have such a good culture. But granted, you know, basketball's worked in those three markets, so to me, I think it's fine. But also playing in Nashville, Miami, trying out new markets too, I could see that. I mean, but the WNBA also needs to grow more before you even get to those kind of levels. And the other big problem with the WNBA is player likability. Outside of Caitlin Clark, I either don't really know about these players or I don't like them. Like Angel Reese said she wants to be the villain. How do I get my head around that? Saying you like to be the villain? You want to be the hero. I mean, you don't go into work every day saying, well, if I have to do my job really well, I got to be the villain. You know what happens? You get fired. That's what happens. You get fired. You want to be the villain in the workplace, you're going to get fired because you're going to go against everybody. And you can't do that. If you want to build a captivating audience, if you're Angel Reese, you got to be likable. You can't say things like, I want to be the villain. Because if you want to be the villain, then you're not going to get good attention for it. That line alone is why I don't like Angel Reese. It just isn't. Caitlin Clark has the market, the likability, all that. But the WNBA doesn't really market their other players as well. Like Sophie Cunningham, don't really know much about her. I would like to know much more about her. I don't know how good of a player she is. I don't watch the WNBA enough to know. But obviously, like, she's made some noise in the league recently. But Paige Becker's another example. She's made some noise over the last few years, but I don't really know much about Paige Becker's. The WNBA doesn't really market their players very well. Caitlin Clark kind of brought that market to them. The WNBA now needs to take advantage of that. They need to market Caitlin Clark, and they need to market these players better. We need to know them better. And even when we do get to know them, it's kind of polarizing. Like Angel Reese saying she wants to be the villain. How do I get my head around that? How do I like Angel Reese once she says that? I don't. So that's just my opinion on that. There needs to be more marketability and likability in the WNBA players, and then I think that league is going to grow exponentially. Caitlin Clark has already brought so much to the WNBA, and I think she deserves a ton of credit for that. So Caitlin Clark gets the credit for that. I think the league needs to embrace it a little bit better than they have. I don't think they've done enough. The WNBA has been more so resistant to having finally a face of the franchise. I mean, imagine if the NBA, and this is even going to the LeBron and Michael Jordan era, imagine in the NBA, Michael Jordan was Michael Jordan was feared by the NBA players. People were afraid of Michael Jordan. LeBron James, I don't know if they were afraid of him as much, but LeBron James has been revered. So was Michael Jordan. Not the WNBA, but the NBA embraced those guys. The NBA embraced it. It brought more to the game. Heck, the NBA was on verge of bankruptcy before Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. You know why? Because they didn't have likable players, they didn't have marketable players, and they didn't have a good product. It didn't become a good product until Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. And both of them very likable. I want to say Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese could be a great rivalry, honestly, because Angel Reese already said she wants to be the villain. We've already seen on the college level them become rivals. But Angel Reese isn't likable and Caitlin Clark is, and that's a problem. That's a problem for the WNBA. That's not like Larry and Bird. I mean, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were both likable, both great basketball players, and arguably saved the NBA. There probably isn't a Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, Shaq, or even the newer guys, Kevin Durant, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't think there's any of these guys if there's not a Larry Bird or a Magic Johnson. They saved the NBA. Absolutely saved the NBA. A league on the verge of bankruptcy. The NBA embraced two star players in Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. The WNBA seems to be resistant to embracing Caitlin Clark. And that's going to be a big problem in their league. They're expanding to 3 more teams. The WNBA wants to thrive as a league. They need to embrace Caitlin Clark. Period. End of story. And players need to be more marketable and more likable. And that's on the WNBA to figure out. That's not necessarily on the players. That's on the WNBA. They need to market their players a lot better. Caitlin Clark kind of brought her market to the WNBA. I want to see players like a Sophie Cunningham start to build an impressive market, or a Paige Beckers, or even an Angel Reese. I don't want to root against her. She said she's the villain. There's ways to make yourself likable. You can come back from doing unlikable things. A lot of players in the NBA or the NFL have done that based on production. And obviously, there's off the court, off the field issues, stuff like that. I mean, but still, comeback stories do happen. And they're great. They can be great. Like Michael Vick. And what Michael Vick did off the field was terrible. But when you look at what Michael Vick did back on the field, and well, I should say this, what Michael Vick did off the field was not only terrible, it was cruel and ridiculously foolish. And no man should do what Michael Vick did. I'll just say that flat out. But when Michael Vick came back on the court, back on the field, I should say, he lit up the league. His jersey sales went up, and he became a star again. Obviously, it fizzled out a few years later. But Michael Vick was able to come back from that. Now, what Michael Vick did off the field was, as I said, inhumane. So I wanted to get that out there now. But that's like kind of a comeback story. And I'm not trying to compare that to any WNBA player or whatnot, but still, like, you could do an unlikable thing, or even say like an accidental thing, like Jedrick Wills Jr. last year. This is a better example. Jedrick Wills Jr. last year said that he made a business decision to not play. Granted, if Jedrick Wills Jr. came back to the Browns this year and played great, I would forget about that. He said one dumb thing. That's kind of just like what Angel Reese did. She said one dumb thing about I want to be the villain. You can forget about that if Angel Reese starts to produce and does more likable things. Or Jedrick Wills started doing more likable things, which I don't think he will, but still, I'd like him better. That's just my point. So, yeah, I don't want to compare the Michael Vick might have not been the great example for that, but still, that's my point, though. Coming back from one mistake and making it better afterwards, in terms of something like what Jedrick Wills Jr. did for the Browns, I think that's where the WNBA needs to go. So that's my opinion on that, and why I think the WNBA needs to market these players better. We got to get to know more about Paige Beckers, Sophie Cunningham, some of these other players in the WNBA. Caitlin Clark has brought so much to that league, and I think the WNBA needs to embrace it better than they have. All right, let's move on to the NFL. Some big offseason moves, obviously. When you look at the Steelers, Aaron Rodgers is now a Steeler, traded for Jalen Ramsey after trading Minkah Fitzpatrick back to the Miami Dolphins. That's obviously a good move for the Steelers. The Steelers right now are essentially in Super Bowl or bust mode. I don't see after this year, maybe Aaron Rodgers plays one more season, but to me, I feel like this is it. This is the last hurrah. Mike Tomlin's a coach that's never been under 500. Aaron Rodgers had a below 500 season last year. My expectation is the Steelers are going to be at least 9-8, but they're at a point where they need to win playoff games. I was stunned to learn, I think Mike Tomlin lost his last 7 playoff appearances. Which, granted, I mean, Marvin Lewis did too. I believe it was 0-7. But granted, Mike Tomlin also has a Super Bowl championship. He's won a bunch of division titles. He's turned nothing into something. I think he deserves a lot more credit in Pittsburgh than he's given by the fan base, not necessarily the organization. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers organization has done their fair share. They're doing what they're doing right because they are a good organization. But granted, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on Mike Tomlin to be successful this year. Aaron Rodgers, I think we already know who he is. I don't necessarily think the pressure is really on him. I think it's on Mike Tomlin this season. They got to win at least a playoff game and start to grow and advance, or else the fans in Pittsburgh are not going to be happy. And so getting Jalen Ramsey for the defense, I think, is a good move. He's been a great interchangeable defensive player. And when you look at the Miami Dolphins getting Minkah Fitzpatrick back, I think they get a nice player as well. The Miami Dolphins are still kind of a bubbling playoff team, probably not a playoff team. I don't know what to make of them. They're a weird football team right now. The Steelers are not necessarily far off. They're kind of in that bubble as well. You're in a division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. So to me, you have to show some promise. And Aaron Rodgers is essentially the only promise they have right now. Develop Will Howard maybe into something. I hope he's the guy. Because honestly, I think that's going to be Pittsburgh's best bet, is to hope Will Howard is the guy at this point for the future. Try to win a playoff game this year with Aaron Rodgers, try to make some kind of run. Aaron Rodgers, who's been known in his career to not turn the ball over a hell of a lot with the New York Jets. So that's something to look at and figure out if you're the Steelers. And the Steelers are not going to like turnovers. So Aaron Rodgers is going to have to keep his composure. I think he's got the right coach and the right system. It's not the dysfunctional New York Jets. So Aaron Rodgers is definitely in a much better situation when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it's a matter of how the season ends for the Pittsburgh Steelers with Aaron Rodgers now on the roster. But it's going to be a tall task when you play Baltimore twice and you have to play Cincinnati twice. That's going to be something that the Pittsburgh Steelers have to figure out if they're going to have a successful year. Omar Khan also signing that mega deal to stay with Pittsburgh. I mean, he didn't draft Kenny Pickett. That was a Colbert move. So I think that shouldn't go against him or Mike Tomlin for that matter. And they moved off Kenny Pickett so quickly, I don't think it will. It's probably a good move by the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially if Aaron Rodgers ends up working out. The Steelers as an organization know what the hell they're doing. I mean, the clowns certainly don't. The clowns certainly don't know what the hell they're doing. So you got to give the Steelers props when they do the right things, because if they were my organization, I'd be a lot more happy with them than I am with the clowns. And yeah, I'm not rooting for the Steelers to have a good year because I'm a Clowns fan at heart, but we'll talk about those clowns here in a second. The Dolphins getting Darren Waller from the Giants. Another interesting move. Waller's coming out of retirement to play for Miami. Nice, okay weapon maybe for the Dolphins. I mean, the Dolphins already have Waddle so locked in. You think of guys like Tyreek Hill, and I still question mark Tua when it comes to the Dolphins. I don't know if he's the answer. So to me, an okay move by the Dolphins. They need to figure out a way, though, to be consistent this year and try to get back to the playoffs, because I don't think if they don't make the playoffs, Mike McDaniel's their head coach next year. I think he's on the hot seat big time, and it's all going to come down to where the Dolphins finish this season, just kind of like where the Steelers are. Granted, if the Steelers don't win a playoff game, I don't think that's going to cost Mike Tomlin his job. I think if Mike McDaniel doesn't even make the playoffs or gets to the playoffs and loses that game, I think it's possible he is going to be fired from Miami. And the Dolphins currently now have the longest playoff win drought, I should say. Longest playoff drought is their division rival, the New York Jets, who haven't made it since 2010. But Miami is currently the longest playoff win drought. They haven't won a playoff game since 2000. That's a quarter of a century of no playoff wins. So Miami is definitely in a win now mode, and I don't think that's a team that's built to win now. All right, let's move on to the Clowns here locally in Cleveland. All right, I'm calling them the Clowns, and then the Browns. I get it. But I am frustrated with them. And it's not their drafting. I mean, listen, was it weird they took Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders in the same draft? Sure. They got Shedeur cheaper. He was supposed to go 2 overall, and he fell all the way to the 5th round. And everybody in the media was criticizing the NFL and all this stuff for Shedeur Sanders falling so far, when we don't even know how good Shedeur Sanders is going to be. He wasn't a high-rated prospect. I mean, he was a high-rated prospect that fell, but how sure are we that that's really going to be the case? Not only that, clearly the Browns favored Dylan Gabriel because that's why they drafted him beforehand. So Shedeur Sanders right now already has a speeding ticket under his belt, and I want to like Shedeur Sanders. I want to like whoever starts quarterback for the Browns, obviously. But granted, he's already done unlikable things, and it's the offseason. I'm already concerned about how he's going to pan out on the field. I mean, say it as that. Start Flacco and play all four of these guys this year and call this season a wash now. I don't expect this team to win many football games. I don't honestly care if they win many football games. It's atrocious to me that this organization is doing what they're doing, not just outside of their football operations, but with their stadium. And we're going to get to that in a second. That's why I'm calling this season a wash and why I'm really mad at the Browns. But having said that, I think it is important we mention that Shedeur Sanders being a fifth-round pick now should have different expectations. Shedeur Sanders, a lot of pundits in the media are saying, well, Shedeur Sanders, who is really a first-round pick but drafted in the fifth round. No, he's not. That's not true. He was drafted in the fifth round. He's a fifth-round pick. Could he be great? I could be wrong. He could be great. But we're already seeing off-the-field issues to a degree, and he was drafted fifth, which means the Browns themselves really don't believe in him. So you got him cheaper. Try it out. See if it works out. You never know. But also, now we have to deal with Shedeur Sanders and now LeVar Ball. I mean, Deion Sanders and LeVar. Deion Sanders and LeVar Ball. And the reason I'm dreading that is just because I have to hear all that all day. I actually personally like Deion Sanders. I don't really like LeVar Ball. But granted, that's going to be a thing we're going to have to deal with here in Cleveland for a while because of Lonzo going to the Cavs, which is a good move, by the way. I just don't like that we're going to have to deal with LeVar Ball and hearing him talk and all that. But I personally like Deion Sanders. We'll see if this works out. But to me, I am just struggling to really want to support this football team right now. And we'll get to the stadium here in just a second. But granted, when I look at how this roster is constructed, all the question marks it contains, and the expectations for the season being as low as they are, what is there to go out and get Brown season tickets for? What is there to go out and support a brand new, beautiful domed stadium for? This team stinks. They stunk last year. They showed exactly why Deshaun Watson wasn't worth that $230 million contract that they decided to give him. They did nothing right last year outside of, they re-signed Myles Garrett. That could be a wrong move. This could be a total rebuild necessary. To me, there's nothing about the Browns right now that are giving this city or the Northeast Ohio region anything, yet we continue to give them all this attention, all these headlines. And I get it. We love football in the Northeast Ohio region. But to me, I'd rather support the struggling Guardians team because I know the Guardians, at the end of the day, care more about the fans than I think the Clowns certainly do. I'm really at that point. I think the Cavs, there's no question they care, and they're going to figure things out. They're coming off a not necessarily the playoff run we were hoping for. Even though the Guardians are struggling this season, I'm willing to put my head and rally around that because at least I think, and I'm very confident, Chris Antonetti knows what the hell he's doing, and Stephen Vogt, I still believe in, even though we're struggling a little bit this year. I still would put my head around the Guardians, and the same thing with the Cavs. But when it comes to the Clowns, it's this quarterback situation, it's this roster construction, it's mind-boggling decisions, and to top it off, and we're going to officially get to it now, it's the stadium. I hate to break everyone's bubble, and sure, we're allowed to have nice things. I get that. We're Cleveland. You're allowed to have nice things, yada, yada, yada. Sure, we are allowed to have nice things. Great. Let's build a new, beautiful domed stadium. Spend all the money on it. The taxpayers are paying for it. We already have a stadium that I think is just fine on the lake. Maybe renovate that a little bit. But we also have a billionaire owner in Haslam who has the money to afford these things and can do it, but is making the taxpayers pay for them. And it doesn't matter what political party you lean in. This is not a political show. So I'm not even getting into anything political with that. I'm talking about the politics behind a new stadium. It doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, yada, yada, yada. If you voted to pass forward this bill and make this stadium a reality, I don't personally think you did the taxpayers any justice. I just don't. I think it's a shame because we're going to be taking away the attention that's now going to be centralized in the new Brook Park Stadium. away from great areas in town, like downtown Berea, the lakefront, West 6. What's West 6 going to be without a Brown Stadium? All the businesses down there, the local bars and restaurants, going to be nothing. When you look at downtown Berea not being too far away from Brook Park, a lot goes on in downtown Berea. Is that going to shift attention now to this new little Haslam land, I like to call it, in Brook Park? That Haslam can clearly afford and is choosing not to, by the way. Brook Park, are you going to be able to build all these fancy new hotels that were designed specifically for people visiting from the airport? Now you're going to have to build a whole bunch more of them because you're going to have all these events. And I just want to let you know, if Cleveland gets the Super Bowl out of this, it's only going to be the one. It's going to be just like Detroit. There's a reason the NFL is not going to go back and have another Super Bowl in Detroit. It's hotel capacity. It's lack of luxurious options. Jacksonville's the same way. People in Jacksonville, when they had this Super Bowl, they had to sleep in boats. Think about that. Because they didn't have enough hotel space in Jacksonville. So Jacksonville's never getting the Super Bowl again. Detroit's never getting the Super Bowl again. Cleveland's going to be the same thing. They don't have the hotel capacity. We'll get one Super Bowl, and the NFL will never come back, and they'll complain a laundry list of reasons why. The NFL likes New Orleans, where there's attractions, and I get that. You want to do fun things when you go watch the Super Bowl. Miami, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, all the fun spots. You're going to have like a nice little area in Brook Park. Everything major is going to be downtown anyway. And now that the Brown Stadium isn't even downtown, that's going to be a major problem for you. And Jimmy Haslam has the money to pay for all this, but the taxpayers have to pay for it. And so I don't think it's doing anybody in the region any justice whatsoever. I don't. That's my personal opinion. I disagree with it strongly. And I think that a lot of people that voted for this spit on the taxpayers. That's just my opinion. So I'm just going to leave it there. I think it's a stupid move. We have a great stadium already on the lakefront. It's not necessarily state of the art. We could redo it. We can make it a little bit better. But I personally think that stadium is fine. We don't need a giant dome that we're only going to really use for a few events here. Because, surprise, surprise, it's only going to be used a few events a year. Sure, they're going to be slightly more. Yes, there's going to be some more concerts and an indoor venue. Sure, there's going to be a Final Four probably at some point, one Final Four and one Super Bowl. That's it. They're never coming back. So, yeah, it will be used slightly more times a year, sure. But granted, there's nothing really special about a dome. I'm sorry. There's nothing special about it. The elements have made Cleveland football weather special. Look at Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati. None of those three teams play in a dome. How's that going to help the Browns out? Dome stadium is stupid, period. And it's the taxpayers paying for it, not just Haslam. It's the taxpayers contributing to it. I get that the current stadium, Huntington Bank Field now, is not ideal. You need to renovate it a little bit. But to me, I think the Browns truthfully don't care. I think they want to make more money. That's my opinion on it. And I'm struggling to kind of support the Browns as an organization because of that. Am I still going to wear my colors on Sunday? Sure. Am I going to party in the Muni lot a little bit when it's Sunday before a football game, go visit some friends? Of course. But, I mean, while you can still party in the Muni lot, I should say. But still, to me, the soul is how well is your organization run? And how much do you really care about your fans? I'm starting to question how any of these professional teams even really care. And even all this is for all teams at this point. How much do you really care about fans and the consumers at this point? And how should the consumer respond? Obviously, the best response is probably don't buy season tickets, only watch games on regular TV, don't buy packages from streaming services to watch every single game because you got to watch every single game. Those are the typical answers, I'd say, and probably the right way to handle it. But the big thing is regular TV should be airing also the Cavs and the Guardians games and all the other sporting events as well. We're paying for these taxpayer stadiums. And obviously the Browns, they're pretty much on regular TV anyway, so that's not really affecting them. But the stadium thing is. And so I think it's unfair to the taxpayers, personally, that we can't just watch these games, and that's Guardians and Cavs, on regular TV anymore either. The TV market in Cleveland is small, but it's also affordable. I mean, there's a lot of channels. I don't even know what they do. What is WBNX in Cleveland air anymore? I know they used to be the old WB affiliate, now CW affiliate, and I think CW went to 43, which I don't even know what they air anymore. I haven't watched the CW in a long time. So if you watch the CW, I don't know. I literally think it's been since like Gilmore Girls when anybody watched those channels. Like that's how long it's been. But granted, those are two channels I think we have out in the open. Why don't we air Cavs games on there? Why don't we add Guardians games on there? Why, if we're paying our taxes towards these stadiums, we should have the right to watch these games for free. And I think the Browns, even though they're not necessarily in the same boat, it regards to the stadium too. Like, we are paying for the stadium, so we should be getting discount offers. Ticket sales are only going to go up now. I mean, they're only going to go up. The parking is going to be outrageous. There is honestly no reason to support this. That's just my opinion. So if you're a Browns fan, turn on the TV, watch the game on Sundays. But I'll tell you what, I don't plan on going to a single Browns game this season because I don't want to endorse this stupid stadium idea. That's just my thoughts on it. I think it's dumb, and I think we're wasting our taxpayer money on it. And Mayor Justin Bibb of Cleveland said it best. There are more important things than the Cleveland Browns. You're damn right they are. You're damn right they are. So it's a darn shame. But I think they're robbing fans blind. And that's just my opinion on the matter. And we'll leave it there. I know I've gotten kind of emotional on the stadium subject, but that's truthfully how I feel on it. And I think if you are paying your tax money towards this stadium, you should be a little upset as well, because that money should be going to better things. Maybe to other TV stations like WBNX and WAB to air our sporting events, which they don't do. Honestly, we are paying taxes on all these buildings. We should be watching these games for free on an antenna at this point. That's just my opinion. This has been the first edition of Raw Takes Live. Hope you had a great time with us today if you joined. If you're watching this pre-recorded from earlier today or tomorrow or whenever you choose to watch it, thank you so much. Leave a comment. We didn't get much in the live chat, and I didn't have anything on my X account either, but feel free to react. I want to hear from you. You can reach out to me directly on social media. I want to hear from you guys, and we're going to be doing this weekly. Days may change depending on what's going on with my schedule, but we are going to do a weekly edition of the show every week, so make sure to stay tuned here on YouTube for that. Also, check out the show on social media. The next edition of Raw Takes Live will be next Saturday at 7:30. That's going to be the next edition of Raw Takes Live. Next Saturday, 7:30 a.m. Make sure to stay tuned. Might be a little bit of a shorter show, but we will be here for a little bit next Saturday morning. Make sure to stay tuned. Make sure to check out the show as well on social media, Facebook, Instagram at Hody Raw Takes, and you can find me on X at Hody Raw Takes as well. All right. That's the first episode in the books. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you for watching Raw Takes Live for the first time with Andrew Hody. Can't wait to be back with you next week.